And beginning what now is chapter 18 and 19 in the book of John. And these two chapters cover the crucifixion, or first the conviction, and then the crucifixion of Jesus. And so you'll notice as we go through these scriptures that if you read Matthew 27 and 28, if you read Mark 13 and 14, and if you read Luke around 21, 22, how those chapters are written and what John depicts here are going to be not different, but John definitely leaves some stuff out. And I'm going to show you that as we walk through these verses. And Matthew, Mark, and Luke, there is a way more commentary of the events of the conviction scenes alone. The crucifixion scenes, those gospels give you more detail. And so I'm giving you basically an argument tonight of what John chooses to write about, and I'll highlight you those differences of where some other gospels might write some more stuff. Is John, I think, is trying to depict Jesus in this light. So I've shared this verse with you many, many times, and I'm very excited to get to finally teach on it soon. We're in John 18. So in John 20:31, the purpose of John's gospel was this: but these are writing so that you may come to believing that three things: that Jesus is the Messiah, the one who comes to take away the sins of the world. He not only is that must mean that he is the Son of God. And that through those two belief world systems, that though believing, you may have life. Not a boring life, not a mundane life, not a life that has to just muddle through this earth, but an exciting, spirit-filled, spirit-driven life. And it's all in his name. And so that, I think, John is going to depict Jesus here through those lenses. In a confident state, he is the Messiah that takes away the sins of the world. In a state that is just firm in knowing exactly what he's walking through. So, let's start. In John 18, verse 1, it says this in the first 11 verses. After Jesus had spoken these words, he went out with his disciples across the Kidron Valley to a place where there was a garden. Notice he doesn't even name it, which he and his disciples entered. Now you'll notice he refers to Judas twice here as who betrayed him. Now Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place because Jesus often met there with his disciples. So Judas brought a detachment of soldiers together with police from the chief priests and the Pharisees, and they came there with lanterns and torches and weapons. Then Jesus, knowing all that was to happen to him, came forward and asked them, "Whom are you looking for?" They answered, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus replied, "I am he." Judas, again, who betrayed him, was standing with them. When Jesus said to them, "I am he," they stepped back and fell to the ground. Again, he asked them, "Whom are you looking for?" And they said, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus answered, "I told you that I am he. So if you're looking for me, let these men go." This was to fulfill the word that he had spoken. "I did not lose a single one of those whom you gave me." Then, good old Peter, Simon Peter, who had a sword, drew it, struck the high priest's slave, and cut off his right ear. The slave's name was Malchus. Jesus said to Peter, "Put your sword back in its sheath. Am I not to drink the cup that the Father has given me?" And so what I want to do is just kind of give you 5 little points here as we just went through these 11 verses to kind of set you a context of these verses. I think we can visualize. They're not hard to interpret. We know what's going on here. This isn't like a mystical thing we're reading in the Bible here. But notice, first thing John doesn't mention, the agony of prayer with Peter himself and James. And all the other gospels, this starts off with the prayer at Gethsemane and Jesus on a rock shedding blood and praying, "Father, let this cup from me." John goes, "I want to per se Jesus as the Messiah." That's what I'm showing. So there's no mention of it. There's no mention of the prayer. It's interesting. John, who was there, didn't feel the need to write it down. Another note is it says that Judas brought a detachment of soldiers. Now, we do a play here, and our detachment is quite small. If you watch our play, our detachment's about 3 people that come hoarding into the room, right? Not that that's a bad thing. We just have a smaller cast, right? So the word here that was used it really means cohort. And really what this means is it would be about 500 people. All right, that's what the word denotes. So Judas brought a detachment of soldiers. So when they're reading this, it would be about 500 people. So if you go through the list of people who were there, it seems really unlikely that 500 people were there, right? It more than likely was about 50. He probably came up with about 50 people to rest. And I want you to think, and what John is doing here and why he's using this word detachment. If it was only about 50 people, why would John exaggerate it? I don't think he's exaggerating. I think what he's doing is showing the ludicrousy of what's happening here. You have one lone teacher standing in a garden unarmed with 11 frightened men with about 2 swords in between them all. And Judas rolls up with 50 people with pitchforks, swords, and half an army. It proves that Judas knows the power of God. It proves Judas knew who he was going to meet. It proves Judas knew, if I'm going to pull this off, I'm going to need some help because I know what this one lone teacher can do. John is illustrating there had to have been something that Judas knows. Notice, no mention of the kiss from Judas. Never says that Judas came up and kissed Jesus. Not that it didn't happen. It was important to Jesus. He was in command of the situation. Not Judas, not the cohort. It was Jesus. John is depicting in these 11 verses what is the most impressive thing is Jesus' command in this garden. In verse 6, he said to them, I am he. Who are you looking for? We know why you're here. What are you doing here? And there's a lot of commentary on why those soldiers stepped back and fell to the ground, right? Think about this. You have 50 people who were following Sadducees, evil high priests. An evil plan was at foot here. And you have 50 people coming to storm one man, and the one man's supposed to be scared of you. He is not supposed to be in command here. He is not supposed to be talking. Remember, you're the one doing the talking. You're the army. And they roll up in the garden, and Jesus just approaches them. Who you looking for? And then he goes, well, me. And all of a sudden, these guys who were not sure about this plan in the first place are like, oh, God, he's talking to us. Right? He backs up. They fall over one another. It's impressive, the command. He just got done agonizing, shedding blood, begging the Father to take this cup from him moments earlier. And now he's in full command going, I'm ready. That's power. Not fighting. Notice Jesus never threw a punch here. Never throws a punch, never denies what's about to happen, confronts it head on. And then lastly, John illustrates Jesus and his lordship of the situation. He knew. Jesus answered. And you see, he's the one now giving commands. I told you that I am he. So if you're looking for me, let these men go. Now, John doesn't say it, but I am pretty sure if I was a disciple, I'd be hightailing it out of there. If Jesus said to the 50 that's here to attack me, oh, let these guys go. Oh, he said I can leave? Right? You know you'd be out. The Bible doesn't say that they left, but Peter and John seem to be the only two that knew that the dude's ear got cut off, right? Because Peter's the one that did the cutting and John's the one that did the reporting. So those two, Peter just said, I got to stay here. I told you I'd go with you to your death, so I got to be here. I don't know why John stayed, but he just chose to. And so it's just those 5 things are kind of really important to show. I think that's why John is leaving out stuff here. He's just trying to prove that Jesus is in full command of what's happening. And it's also interesting here too, that John will, throughout these passages, I'm going to point it out to you, does some contrasting here. And the first contrast he makes is Judas and Peter. Peter becomes quite a main story in here. He's a main character in these stories, if you know anything about the Bible. He denies Jesus here, spoiler alert. And so we'll get into that. But I mean, here, Judas, he's referred to twice here as the one who betrayed Jesus, verse 2 and verse 5. It's very key. Judas is the one who is there to betray Lord Jesus. but also he knew about the power of God. He brought 50 people to arrest one guy. He is cool and calculating, thinking that it is this through in advance. Judas knew what was happening, knew he was approaching, and planned this out. And then you have Peter. He looks kind of foolish in this situation, right? He kind of hastily, in his attempt to, and honestly, like I really think Peter was going for the head and the slave was quick enough and ducked it, right? That's why he got his ear, right? It wasn't like Peter's super good with a sword and was like, I'll just cut off your ear. Like I really think he was just trying to protect Jesus, and like the dude was just quick, right? And so it's just interesting that like I've done this where I thought I was doing something for the Lord and I ended up lopping an ear off. Right, we work real hastily for the Lord and we do something that we think's real right in the eyes of God. And we're doing this, and this is what we need to do, right? Peter with a sword, just whah! And we ended up lopping an ear off. And I've personally done that so many times where I've been bold in what I thought God wanted me to do or say or present this truth to somebody, and all I did is I lopped off ears. Right? It's interesting when Jesus rebukes Peter, he really does gives us a lesson of how we conquer the hearts of men. He rebukes Peter. He says, well, then Simon Peter, who had a sword, he drew it and he struck the high priest's slave and he lopped off his ear. And John gives us the name of the slave. And Jesus said to Peter, in essence, I'm not here to cut men apart. You see, our words are never meant to cut. Our words are never meant to destroy. Our words are never meant to do anything that's not going to win the heart of anybody. And Jesus says that to Peter here, and luckily, John, again, he doesn't say this. He reaches down and heals the man's ear. He just puts it back on his head, right? Like, which has got to be super weird for the dude that got his ear cut off, right? Like blood everywhere and ears on the ground, and Jesus is just like, got you, bro. And just puts it on the side of his head, which is awesome for Peter because now he doesn't have to answer questions. You see the grace that comes then from representing the truth. Peter now doesn't have to answer for what he's done, because Jesus made that preparation for him. And so even in just the hasty decision of Peter, Jesus is still working in grace. And so he just says the most profound thing, like, Peter, we're not here to cut down. Am I not to drink the cup that the Father has given me? You see, that is the Father's, somehow this terrible cup of pain and shame and loneliness and agony. This was the Father's choice. It was the choice of what he had Jesus go through. It was the choice, that pain, that awful situation was the choice of the Father for Jesus to walk through. And Jesus the whole time in command and truth displays grace. And it really begs the question, have we learned this lesson in life yet? Have we learned when we walk through pain, grief, loneliness, strife, that it was the Father's plan and we walk through with truth and grace? Exactly what Bill's going in his sermon with the life of Joseph. And just taking what comes and being a man of God to say, all right, I'm going to represent God in all that's happening right now. And Jesus is explaining this to Peter in this, am I not just supposed to walk through this? Is this not what the Father has chosen for me? And man, when we learn that lesson and learn to walk through that pain and not in complaining or bucking or wondering or loss of faith, but just to say, God, I know you're in control and I know you've put me here. Give me the strength to continue to walk. And so that's kind of what Jesus is doing here in the opening 11 verses, is John's depicting him in full understanding of what's going on. Full understanding and command even. Not a wonder. This isn't a mystery to Jesus. He was ready to pounce. And so now John, after that, he transitions into a trial before a Jewish priest. In John 18:12 through 18, it says this, well, so the soldiers, their officer, and the Jewish police, they arrested Jesus and they bound him. First, they took him to Annas, who wasn't even anybody. He was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was the high priest. And so Caiaphas was the one who had advised the Jews that it was better to have one person die for the people. Simon Peter, man, here he comes again, and another disciple followed Jesus. Since that disciple was known to the high priest, he went with Jesus into the courtyard of the high priest. Because here's Peter. Peter was standing outside at the gate. So the other disciple, who was known to the high priest, notice that's the second time that was written, went out. He spoke to the woman who guarded the gate, and they brought Peter in. So now Peter's inside this trial. And the woman said to Peter, "You are not also one of this man's disciples, are you?" He said, "I am not." Now the slaves and the police had made a charcoal fire because it was cold, and they were standing around it warming themselves. Peter also was standing with them and warming himself. I thought it was really odd that they described where Peter was standing. I don't know why that was odd to me, but when I read that, I was like, that seems like a really dumb detail to me. But first, I want to point out, we have an unnamed disciple again. I'm sure you all remember in John 11, when we were going through that sermon, there was a disciple that was called the beloved disciple. It said Jesus, the beloved, or Jesus was with his beloved disciple. And a lot of people hypothesize that that was John. I'm hypothesizing the same thing here. As John 11, John, for some odd reason, just does not, he didn't write about himself in the prayer of the Garden of Gethsemane. He didn't name himself as the beloved disciple. And again, here, he's just not naming himself. But it makes sense. John was a fisherman. He would have made many trips to Jerusalem into the high priest selling fish. And so it makes total sense that the high priest would have known John. But also it's interesting that John knew the name of the high priest's slave. Remember, he named him Malchus. You know, it was Malchus's ear, right? I know this guy. We've had a reputation. And so the first thing just is this unnamed disciple. I really do believe it was John. So John follows Jesus in with the other disciples, but Peter's far back. He's kind of wandering back here, right? Kicking himself. I cut off a dude's ear. Thank God Jesus saved me. But here I am wandering behind the disciples. Everything's a mess. Jesus was just arrested. I'm a fool. He's behind everybody. And this woman comes out, John comes out and be like, "Peter, what are you doing out there? Get in here." Right? And so John talks to the guard and says, "Hey, let this guy in." And it's really interesting here that Peter lies and he has no reason to. The other disciples were already in the trial. They were standing in the courtyard with no problem. This woman asks Peter a question and says, "Well, aren't you with them too? Like, aren't you with them? Remember them? Aren't you with them?" And there's no reason, there's no threat here. He could have said yes and walked with John and the other disciples like, "Hey guys, what's up?" Instead, he just lies for no reason. There is no reason for this man's denial. And right here, at this minute, when he lies, he starts an avalanche of destruction in his life because of that lack of affiliation with the disciples. Peter, at this minute, and I often wondered, I had a problem with lying in my life. When I was in high school, I loved to make myself sound better than I was. Still am a very sarcastic person, probably because I like to make myself better than I am, and I like to sound better than I am and tell you I did better things than actually happened. You know, like every fishing story you've ever heard, the fish gets bigger every time you've told the story, right? And I just wonder if that's somebody else that I woke up one day and said, "Man, why am I doing this? Why am I making myself better? Why can't I just accept who I am? Why do I have to lie about who I am?" That's what started Peter's destruction. His lack of identity ruined his relationship with God for about 3 days. That lie, right? Well, there's two more that come after this. Sorry, spoiler alert. He runs out into Jerusalem and just starts weeping because he realizes, I've let myself get so far away from the truth that now I don't even know who I am. And man, I woke up one day in that spot, and it's not a fun place to be when you realize, I don't know if I know who I am anymore. I've lied so many times, I don't know if I've ever told the truth. And so I just wonder if anybody's there tonight. Peter was. You notice he had to go stand with people he didn't even know. Peter also was standing with them, all the police. Nobody even knew. He could have been in community. Had he just said the right thing without any lie, he could have been in the right situation. And so John continues here after Peter's lie, and there's no reason to lie here. John just kind of continues, and he kind of skips some things here because we went from Annas, the father-in-law, to now we're at the high priest. So again, John's not giving us everything. He's not giving us a trip across the courtyard. He's just saying, then the high priest questioned Jesus. So we went from Annas, the father-in-law, the power behind the throne, to now we're at the high priest. About his disciples and about his teaching. And Jesus answered here, I have spoken openly to the world. We're in a trial at this point. Have I always taught in synagogues and in the temple where all the Jews come together? I haven't done anything in secret. Where all the Jews come together. I have said nothing. Why do you ask me this question? Ask those who heard what I said to them. They know what I said. When he had said this, one of the police standing nearby struck Jesus in the face, saying, is that how you answer the high priest? Jesus answered, I have spoken wrongly. Testify to the wrong. Tell me what I just did wrong if I did something wrong. But if I've spoken rightly, why do you strike me? Then Annas, I'm sorry, we're still at Annas, my bad, sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest. And so, one thing here I want to mention is Annas is not the high priest. He's the father-in-law. Remember, John reported that he's the father-in-law of what's going on. And so this is a preliminary hearing that John is giving us, that Jesus went through, right? And so what I want to point out here too, is there's another contrast drawn here by John. He's drawing another contrast. So the first one was Judas and Peter, right? A man who was uncalculated, a man who wasn't. And here you have him drawing another contrast between Peter and Jesus. And so why I say that is the first one was Peter was asked a very simple, non-condemning question with no punishment for telling the truth, and he answered with a lie. That is what Peter did. Jesus, on the other hand, was asked an illegal question. Like our law system, it is not required to testify against yourself. You do not have to testify. This high priest looked right at Jesus and said, you must testify. So Jesus, in an illegal situation, answers with truth. He straight stands there and says the truth. In an illegal situation, Peter asks a question, doesn't need to lie, and does. John is intentionally telling us this story this way to draw this contrast. But as I was studying this, the verse came up here of Matthew 5:39. If anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. I have to be really careful here because I can make a sermon out of this. I want you to notice a couple things here about this verse because this verse gets miscommunicated like we're doormats. This verse gets communicated like if someone slaps you, you stand there and let him hit you again. You don't push back. You don't stand up. You just are humble. Christians are humble, simple people who just docilely go through life. And Jesus is teaching here in the Sermon on the Mount that, man, if someone strikes you, just ask him to hit you again because, man, we need to suffer. That is not at all what my Lord is displaying here in any way, shape, or form. He is showing such strength. Because the truth of the matter is Jesus answered twice with just straight truth. All he did was answered, if I've spoken openly to the world, I've not done anything wrong. I have always taught in synagogues and temples. Where are all the Jews that come together? I have said nothing in secret. Why do you ask me? What are you teaching and who you are? I've never done anything in secret. And then some guy slaps him trying to impress his boss. And Jesus just stands there and goes, if I said anything wrong, you let me know. If not, why are you hitting me right now? And Tuesday was a very sad day for me. When there's a mandate that goes against truth. There's going to be a lot of churches that are going to go away from that. And Bill talked about it this morning. Where the world goes, the church goes, and that's evil. There's a lot of churches that do that. And what Jesus is teaching here is there's a strength in truth that we stand and we say, whatever. Whatever. I know who my God is. I know what truth is. And you're not going to make me, because that's tyranny. That is communism. That's not America. And I know that steps on toes, and I really don't care, because I promise you it's going to get worse than a vaccine. It's going to get much worse. I said to Will before the service, we have to live in this. I'm 36. I got to live in this a little bit longer. Some of y'all are blessed. You may not have to. Sorry for the old joke. I got to deal with this later. And I promise you, I'm not moving. And I encourage you not to move. There are legal resources that I can tell you about to help you not move in your stance. There's sites and things we can help you with to not move. But church, the minute we start wandering from the truth is the minute the truth loses its power. Is the minute the truth erodes and America stops listening. The only way they're going to listen is if we start representing it. You start backsliding, there's no representation in that. And that is turning the other cheek. It's not weakness. It's a response without violence and abuse. Because that's what Jesus does. It's a strength that says, I'm stating truth and I'm just doing this. I'm not going to strike you. I'm not going to abuse you. I'm not going to bring violence to this. But I'm telling you now, I'm not moving. And that is exactly what Jesus is doing here in this trial with Annas. He knows this is bogus. I'm in the dude's father-in-law's house. This is garbage. This man is nothing. And I'm getting hit and talking to some goon for what? And that's what he knows. He knows he's in control and he knows what he's doing and he's not budging in what he knows he's supposed to do. That's our strength. That's turning the other cheek. That's what Matthew's talking about. He is not talking about a doormat. My God has never been a doormat. So John, instead of telling about the trial with Caiaphas like the other Gospels, he really just now goes on to the actions of Peter. He just moves on. He kind of tells us this trial and kind of just moves on now. In John 18, it says, well, now Simon Peter. He's like transitioning. He's like, oh, Jesus is still in control. He went from in control here to in control here. So now let me tell you about Peter, the other main character. Now Simon Peter was standing and warming himself still, and they asked him again. He's still by the fire. He said, well, aren't you not also one of his disciples, are you? He denied it and said, I am not. One of the slaves of the high priest, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off. You know, like your accent's giving you away, man. I saw you lop the dude's ear off. You were there, right? Did I not see you in the garden with him? If I was Peter, I'd be like, yeah, find me the ear. But anyway, again, Peter denied it. And at that moment, the cock crowed. Again, John gives us no preference of that. We know from the other Gospels what that means. Right? It was predicted that Peter was going to deny Jesus and a rooster's going to crow. We get none of that. John just tells us early that denied him once, tells us about a trial, then gives us the other two. Right? It's really not about what's happening around. It's what Jesus is doing in the story and really Peter. And so it's so brief. It's just such a passing comment. Like the other Gospels, Peter starts vowing in here like, no, I never knew him, never. Like Peter really denies Jesus here. Like it gets bad for Peter after that one lie, right? Like he's not just denying, like he's making oaths in the other Gospels. John's just like, he denied Jesus. Can we move on? It's very brief. And so this whole event took about an hour. But John gets his point across. At the third denial, he hears the rooster, and Peter starts his journey of weeping through Jerusalem. And so after John gives us that, he now turns his attention to Pilate. We're now in Pilate's courtroom. Then they took from Caiaphas to Pilate, his headquarters. It was early in the morning. They themselves did not enter the headquarters so as to avoid ritual defilement and to be able to eat the Passover meal. Why I want to stop here is because it's very, very interesting. What they're referring to, the Passover was just ate. You guys don't know this, Jewish readers would. Was just ate the morning before. So this isn't actually the Passover. It's the ritual of unleavened bread. It's just super interesting here that these people carting around Jesus house to house won't go in a house with leavened bread because they don't want to defile themselves, yet they're trying to kill an innocent man. John is literally wrote this verse to show the hypocrisy of the men ushering Jesus around. They are killing an innocent man, taking him to trial, expediting trials, and the evil that they're doing. And John's like, but they won't enter a house to be defiled. Like, come on, you're pious and you're evil. And so then he continues and says, so Pilate went out and them and said, what accusations do you bring against this man? And they answered, if this man were not a criminal, we would not have handed him over to you. Pilate said to them, take him yourselves and judge him according to your law. Note, Pilate hates Jews, hates them, can't stand them, wants nothing to do with them, wants rid of them off the world. So he's like, you deal with this. I want nothing to do with you. The Jews replied, we are not permitted to put anyone to death. This was to fulfill what Jesus had said when he indicated the kind of death he was to die. You see, Jesus just points out prophecy here, that God is going to die by Roman method, not Jewish method. Jewish method was stoning. If the Jews would have killed Joseph, and they would have been allowed to, they would have stoned him. The Bible prophecy is Jesus would have been crucified, which is a Roman tradition. So it had to go through Pilate that he was going to be crucified. You see, what's super interesting to me here is all of these decisions are being made by evil men. God is still in control. These men are making free will decisions, and God is ultimately still in control of what's happening. So as we continue on, it said, then Pilate entered the headquarters again. He summoned Jesus and asked him, are you the king of the Jews? Jesus answers with a question. Do you ask this on your own, or do others tell you about me? Pilate replied, I'm not a Jew, am I? I can hear the sarcasm, the laughter. Again, he hates Jews. I can hear it in his voice. Your own nation and the chief priests have handed you over to me. What have you done? And so Jesus standing there realizing the predicament of this question. Well, if I say yes to the whole king thing, I'm a threat to Caesar. If I say no, Pilate's going to desist me because he'll just believe I'm not a king, right? Jesus recognizes the weirdness of this situation and just kind of turns it around. And so he asks him a question, were you a Jew or are you a Roman? Are you asking me on your own? Like, you want to know who I am? Or are you listening as a Jew because other people have told you? And so Pilate just really wants to know what's going on. And so this is Jesus' answer. My kingdom is not from this world. If my kingdom were from this world, my followers would be fighting to keep me from being handed over to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not from here. Pilate asked him, so you are a king? And Jesus answered, you say that I am a king. For this I was born. And for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice. You see, Jesus answers here, yeah, this is what I was born for. My kingdom's not here, though. But the work of a king is truth. It is to let people know the real reality of the situation going on. That is the work of a king, truth. And so he's looking at the king, telling him what his job description is. You're supposed to be standing for truth here, buddy. Remember the true thing that you vow, you're a justice, you're a king. There's a truth vow that you've made, and he's reminding Pilate of this. And then Pilate's cue here. The greatest question of all of humanity. Pilate asked him, what is truth? You see, Romans were great with philosophy. They invented it. No doubt, Roman thought here, Pilate's like, well, I don't even know what truth is. Socrates tells me this. Everyone else is telling me this. What is truth? And this is actually the question of a man strung out on religion. The Jews say truth is you in one thing. Socrates is telling me it's another thing. All this philosophy tells me truth is another thing. None of these systems work. What is it? You see, it's the response of a man who's just lost all confidence in life. And it's answered, Jesus really never answers him. And after he said this, he went out to the Jews again and told them, I find no case against him. What's super interesting here is Pilate chose the response of a politician and not the response of a man who stands for truth. Jesus is the man who stands for truth. He's standing there and owning everything happening to him. Pilate pawns it off and says, yeah, well, I can't find anything wrong with this guy. He's not a threat. And honestly, if Pilate wouldn't have said this statement, he would have been let go. At this point, Jesus could have been released in this kind of bogus trial if Pilate would have said, "You're acquitted, man. I find nothing. This guy is truth. There's nothing wrong." He would have left and been not killed. So really, Pilate thinks he's making decisions here. Is he really? So he goes forward and tries a cop-out now to keep the Jews happy because, again, he needs the votes. "But you have a custom that I release someone from you at the Passover. Do you want me to release for you the king of the Jews?" And they shouted and replied, "No, this man, but Barabbas." Now, Barabbas was a bandit. I love that word, bandit. Really, it's just thief, terrorist. It really just means terrorist. But again, John doesn't mention Pilate's wife here. Right? Remember, Pilate's wife gets a dream. "Don't do this. Pilate, don't do it. Don't have anything to do with this man. Send him away." John doesn't care. He's fixed on Jesus and what his authority is doing in the situation. It's not important to John that we know that. And so, here's where we keep going on here. And Pilate does now a terrible thing. We end with these words in verse 19. It says, "Then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged. And the soldiers wove a crown of thorns and put it on his head. And they dressed him in a purple robe. They kept coming up to him saying, 'Hail, King of the Jews,' and striking him on the face." You see, now Jesus begins his physical torment. That whipping that Pilate addresses here is there was metal and bone wrapped into the leather. So when it not just hits you, it grips and rips skin off. There's a crown of thorns pressed on his head. So not only are you mocking him, but now there's just thorn digging into your head. I got a thorn in my finger and I cry. Alone being shoved into my skull. And the soldiers, not only is he in physical, mental anguish, they're mocking and taunting him. "Yeah, what king are you? What power do you have? Show us your might." And so Jesus now is beginning his physical torment, but I want to end with 3 takeaways here that I see. And I think it's clear that human free will is operating within the framework of divine determination. I think it's very evident here that God gives us choices. And I think this is true all throughout life. God gives us choices. We do have the power to choose. There are real choices. But I don't think he's given us all of them. Because that Pilate, he just didn't think of letting him go. Pilate made his choice and said, "I don't find him wrong, but I need the votes so I can get out of this by releasing a prisoner at least." And kind of passes that along. And I just see that we are responsible for the choices we make ultimately fit within the plan and program God is working out. You see, neither Pilate's conscience or Peter's zeal could stand up to the subtle pressure of the world. And I can honestly say neither will ours. If we choose those things, we must suffer the result of our own folly. What it means is when we're looking at our choices that we're facing, there are subtle pressures every day to do this, do that, do this, do this, listen to this, do this. The government says this, do that, right? There's decisions every day of our life. And I promise the more and more you step away from truth, the more and more you distance yourself from it, bringing on you consequences. There is consequences to what we choose. Look at the last line. We are free to choose. We are not free to choose our consequences. Free will is a thing, but man, you see, Pilate chose to compromise. He ended up murdering an innocent man. The crowd chose Barabbas and crucified the Son of God. Jesus chose the cross and ended up King of Kings and Lord of Lords. That's our stance, is truth. And so, lastly, in the middle there, I kind of got him out of order. But Peter, in this story, he was referred to a lot. And he blew it a lot. Peter was not a good representation in the whole crucifixion scene of Jesus. He kind of blew just about every opportunity he had to do anything good. And what I see here is Jesus gave last week us a very strong idea of community and unity. To stick together. Remember, I said unity is not conformity, but unity is sticking, being yourself, but in the realm of the message of God. And Peter abandoned that community. You see, remember, Jesus says to stay in unity. Peter denied his affiliation when there was no pressure to do so. There was none. And he just chose to say, "I don't know them or him." And man, there's a lot of non-pressure Christians right now saying the same thing. I just want you to know, no one's storming the gates of this church to take anything. Truth is still truth, and we stand upon it. There are Christians left and right today denying exactly what they know to be right. And there is just no reason for it. Peter did this and ended up in a terrible mess. I wrote that, but there's a lot more better words I could say, but I couldn't write them on a screen. So he ended up in a lot of heck because he chose to just lie and say, no, I don't know God. I don't need to affiliate with truth. I don't need to be with my disciples in that community to stay strong. We know our leaders being arrested, hit, crucified. I could do nothing about this, and yet I'm going to abandon what I know to be strength to go stand on my own and live a lie. And we do this every day. We just don't stand for truth. And so I see a divine purpose, but multiply what I see is Jesus' quiet strength standing in truth the whole way through this conviction and crucifixion. And so my encouragement, church, stay strong. And I don't mean that in your political party. I do not mean in your opinion of health care. I do not mean on what you feel other people should or should not get or do. That is so far from the topic. What I mean is we have the Word of God, and that is our life, to believe that give life. That is the purpose of John, and we have that truth. And the minute we stop representing it, we lose our power. And so if we need to regain it, that means you got to relearn it. And if that means you just need to get on your face and say, God, forgive me, get me back to where I need to be. That's why we sing a last song. It's really easy. You just say, God, forgive me and help me to be strong. God, motivate me to have the strength to turn the other cheek. And all that means is I know what I know, and you ain't changing it. You can hit me all you want. Go ahead, hit me. I'm not stopping, and I'm not changing, and I'm not denying. This is who I am, and that's who I love. Amen? Let me pray for you. Father, oh God, there's so much around us today. God, we're sad. We're confused. We don't know who to believe. We don't know who to trust. We don't know what to do. Oh God, I'm thankful we have a reliable guidebook that we talked about a couple weeks ago that you gave us in the Bible. And I'm thankful there's truth in it that lets me live my life, and I can make stances based upon that. And it also says once I make that stand that there's provision and promise and grace that stands behind that. And so, Father, I'm standing there. I'm standing with you in front of Annas. I'm standing with you in front of Caius. I'm standing with you in front of Pilate. And I'm saying, I know who my God is. I know what I'm here to do, and I know why I'm here. And I'm not changing it. I'm not denying it, and I'm not fretting about it. So, Father, we need you to move in us a courage, but also a gentleness that says this isn't a violence or abuse, it's a stance of strength. So, God, would you implant that in our spirits deeply? Father, would you rescue our nation? Father, work how you need to accomplish truth. I'm just so tired of watching evil win. So tired of watching unbiblical themes take precedent over truth. And I'm so tired of watching the church just be silent about it. Father, would you break our hearts, but give us a strength to say, this isn't right. Father, do what you do, and we will do what you've given us the strength to do. So, Father, move mightily tonight. God, work in us where we need to fix. If we're that guy lying, help us fix it. If we're the guy lopping off ears, help us fix it. Father, if we're the guy denying truth, warming ourselves over here when we could be in community, help us fix it. God, we thank you for who you are. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Would you stand?